Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today? We'll be relaxing as per usual. I managed to catch it again. My mouse, excuse me, has a double clicking issue, and I clicked start recording and it immediately stopped recording. Luckily, I caught it within the first 5 seconds this time. It was literally on this loading screen. I looked over and I saw it wasn't recording, so there we go. But yeah, I don't really know what I'm going to talk about. We're recording quite late again, as per usual. It was a D&D day, to be fair. But good evening, everyone. I'm here with a late night broadcast. Hope I can make it through this. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 12:05 AM on Tuesday, February 10th, what should be Monday, February 9th, 2026. It was a pretty good session, I think, today. Again, a lot of the sessions so far has been basically just like lore drop after lore drop after lore drop. I did find it funny that one of my players also afterwards was like, I've been loving these roleplay sessions and these conversations, but I do want some action. And I'm like, that's totally fair. Like, and yeah, I'm like, also, apparently a lot of my players do watch my Animal Crossing videos where I talk about stuff from D&D, which I find very amusing because, like, I knew that we sometimes checked out, like, the things I heard from my friends is that if they think they're going to be spoken about in an episode, they'll listen to the episode just to see what I say. Which and I kind of get because it's kind of like, oh, it's me, but it's also like I never mention them by name. I only vaguely talk about them if it's like super relevant, necessary to the conversation I'm having. Otherwise, I generally try and leave them out of these sort of things. I mean, I am publishing this on the internet after all to an audience, and so in my mind, even if they don't really care, I'm just like, yeah, but I'm not gonna just like start publicizing who you are or whatever online. And to me, it's been easier to just be like, alright, I'm not gonna have a blanket rule, not say anything, rather than pick and choose or remember who exactly is okay with necessarily what. But all my players will have to deal with the fact, I suppose, that I vaguely talk about them in the D&D campaigns. So I do find that amusing that my players do watch these, in the sense that, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like having a talk back, and it's nice to have a peek behind the curtain, I suppose, about exactly how, or what goes through my mind when it comes to D&D and why certain choices are made, because there are a lot of choices which have been made, there's a lot of decisions which have to be done which are not necessarily immediately apparent, but are apparent to me, because I'm like, this is what happens when you try and make an absolutely giant anthology world over 2 years for Dungeons and Dragons. Speaking of which, at some point I've got to level them up again. I was considering doing it for previous ones, but also it doesn't feel like, I don't know, yeah, I need like a milestone to be hit or something. Which, they've been basically like on the edge of a milestone for like so long, it feels like it probably should have happened by now. Whoops. How long have I been at level 10 for? Let's see. The general rule of thumb here is that you stay at a level 4 as long as you've been at that level, basically. So leveling up definitely is a lot slower in later levels. Anyway, yeah, we've had a lot of like lore drops in this campaign, in the Friendly Fire campaign, which again, there was even more today, which I didn't necessarily think it was going to be how it went, but it was like that's the direction that it ended up going. Again, which can be kind of a spooky thing, I suppose, as a DM, where it's like, I know you're going to have this conversation, I know kind of what sort of things you ask. The rest of the things, I just got to trust in my own knowledge of my world and my own improvisation skills to be able to answer in character. I will say my accent definitely slipped with this character quite a lot. She's meant to have a sort of like Arabic-inspired accent from this one video I watched about like Arabic accent sounds and something. But then it ended up going very French towards the end, and I was like, oh, whatever, you know, sometimes the accents are just off. Sometimes the voices are just not hitting as they need to be. But again, like, this wasn't exactly the direction I expected him to go in with this conversation. But it's the direction that it ended up being in, so I was just like, okay. You just kind of had to make a runtime decision on the spot, being like, okay, is this enough that I would be willing to give away this information? Sometimes you ask a roll and you'll be like, wow, that's a pretty high roll. I guess it kind of is, but also at the same time, I'm like, is it too early? Because, you know, I think a lot of it at this point for this campaign especially is because, like, I want to sort of give a steady feed of information. And about what the story is. I don't want to like super overwhelm them with like, oh, here's like big hitting facts over and over and over again. But at the same time, you know, it's very disappointing if you're looking after, if you're chasing, like trying to find these facts. I mean, you don't get these facts after doing everything in your power to like necessarily get them. It's all just like a, okay, well, you gotta reward them at the same time. C'est difficile, though. C'est difficile. But yeah, had some pretty nice, pretty big moments. And if my players are watching, I think I've mentioned it before. It's like there have been at least I think 2 or 3 separate occasions where I was like, okay, this seems highly likely action combat, something more violent is going to happen in this session, and then they just avoided it, and I was like, okay, fair enough, I guess. Which I'm not going to say there's not any fault or anything from them for doing that. It's their choice at the end. Some of them, they probably know they avoided combat. Some of them, they might not. But you know, there's this final boss combat which has been waiting around for a while. Which is like, yeah, this combat is coming. Essentially, they know it's coming. And in my mind, it was meant to be an arc ender, them finishing it off. But now it's kind of like the arc enders are kind of already happened. We're kind of like partway through this arc, so now instead it's going to be like a midpoint sort of like spike in this arc. Because I'm like, are they on Act 3 already? Maybe. It's kind of hard to say. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not like self-conscious about like what I say now that I know my players are watching, but I am cautious about what I say because I'm like, I don't want to give anything. I want to make sure I don't give any of the fun parts away necessarily. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what they do because they have a few options necessarily. Because I think they're getting into the higher tiers, like they're on the cusp of basically getting into tier 3 level of play, which makes it rather difficult because it means you have so many different possibilities of what you could do essentially, because you're basically strong enough to do a load of different things. Your spells, you have allies, connections, etc, etc. So like they do have an overall goal of one thing they can do, but it's sort of like how they're going to do it, I don't know. I don't want to even get ideas into their mind about it, so it's sort of just a wait and see sort of thing. But yeah, I will also admit it has been nice doing a lot of these roleplay sessions, and I do like roleplay sessions, but at the same time, you know, D&D is a mix of a lot of different things. I've spoken a lot about the other group, the Slightly Wonders, mainly about their sort of survival kind of campaigny thing which they're doing at the moment, which is pretty different, I think, from a very roleplay heavy sort of like conversational, social intrigue aspect, or investigative campaign which is going on the other. I think as much as I love roleplay, I don't know if I could sustain 2 like very heavy roleplay. Well, maybe I could, I don't know. It might be quite difficult, I think. 2 very heavy roleplay campaigns. I mean, it's because you have to keep so many different sort of facts in your mind about what's going on, and you can't like, you're not meant to like slip up or anything. You got to make sure everything's like coherent from start to end, because if anything's incoherent and they can't make that, they can't bridge the clues together to come to a correct conclusion, then it means it's a failure, I suppose, of your clue giving. I will say there was one notable mistake, and that I did most recently, mainly being the fact that it was a very, very minor thing, but it was basically they said something about like a fact, an event which happened, and they were like, oh yeah, this happened 2 years ago, right? And then I confirmed it happened 2 years ago, and then I brought it up to the other group, which they were like, oh, so it doesn't coincide. And in my mind, I was like, oh, this event is meant to coincide. So I was like, I double checked, and I was like, yep, I just got it wrong. It was actually 3 years ago. And it's a really awkward moment, I think. This one's not awkward mainly because it's like awkward for the opposite reason, like that I just said. Because obviously it feels bad if you give clues and then they can't bridge the clues together to make a final result. This one is sort of like, oh, I'm giving them a final result by accident. It's like on a meta level being like, oh, yeah, I want them to naturally come to a conclusion. Like, oh yeah, these things did coincide, but then I was like, oh, whoops, I got my mistake wrong. I got it wrong. Like, and I explicitly basically confirmed I meant to coincide because I was like, oh, I identified it, rather than me being able to sort of sit back and be like, isn't that curious? When it happens, and I think, you know, considering the fact that there's only one major temporal mistake I think that's happened so far, it's pretty good. Like, I think there have been mechanical hiccups here and there, definitely throughout the entire campaign, but there's not been, that I'm aware of, too many big lore hiccups, or at least ones that I can think of. I think there have been times where I've accidentally let things slip, which I didn't mean to necessarily, but at the same time it's sort of like a, oh well. Do my players remember, do they not? I don't know, because it's hard to say, because a lot of the information they have is sort of like when it becomes relevant, if I remember. It's a bit difficult to list out all the information you have off the top of your head, basically. Well, would be great if they could, but they didn't. But yeah, I mean, but there's also, it's so amusing because despite I had like such big revelations, them talking about things, like, you just, as a DM, you got to bite your like tongue and be like, I can't say anything about this. They're like, why is this happening? And I'm just like, I want to tell you why, but I can't. You'll discover it eventually by yourself, and honestly, you probably have a pretty good theory of why it's happened already. Yeah. I don't know what else I was going to say. But there are some reflections, I suppose, having about the fact that both of these campaigns are in the same world, which, you know, in some ways now, I suppose I wonder if it was a good idea or not. In my eyes, I think it was a very fun idea to be able to give something which, in my opinion, I was like, maybe they can talk about it, like obviously they can share details, they can share stories, be like, oh, this is kind of cool, and then if one character appears in one campaign that appears in the other, be like, whoa, check this out. Hasn't really happened that way. As it turns out, they basically they don't talk too much about what going on, so in each individual campaign is out with each other, which is fine, it's their prerogative, but at the same time it's sort of like, oh, okay, fair enough. And another thing is like it actually gives a possibility to have joint sessions, and it gives the possibility that we can share information in character to each other. Certainly some, shall we say, is it always seen that way? I guess not. But at the end of the day, I don't regret doing it because I still think it's a very cool idea to conceptually do. Because at the end of the day, we're still all one group of friends playing D&D, and this is a pretty nice compromise to be able to have multiple things going at once. That's my perspective. And sometimes as a DM, you know, but there's a lot of things as a DM, I think, where some things I'm very stubbornly so, just being like, this is the way it is because this is the way I want to do it, and you are not going to convince me otherwise because this is just how it is. There are some things which I'm like, okay, you know, the complete opposite, like we can make this flexible, stuff like that. And there's other things where you basically have to sort of evaluate, being like, does this make sense to change it that way, or does it make sense for you not to do it this way? I don't know. There's been handfuls, bucketfuls, I suppose, of each of these throughout both campaigns in multiple ways. Is there a right answer? No. By necessity, no. I will say one final, very exciting thing though is that one of my players says that she might be doing maybe a longer form sort of campaign for a couple months or so, which I'm very interested in. As much as I love DMing, I do like being a player as well. Or at least it takes significantly less prep work, I think, to be a player. And well, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, maybe myself as the player would be awful amounts of prep work, but it is nice to be able to sort of sit back and be like, not be like, okay, I'm going to wrestle with these big lore issues in the world, which I've like fleshed out as best as I can, but then someone raised something which I've never even considered. Making sure everything's cohesive. You might hear me complaining about this, and I don't mean it to come off like I'm complaining about my players or anything like that, or D&D in general. It's great, I love it, it's fun, but it can be a lot of work sometimes. That's the long and short of it. And I think that's totally fair and totally normal. Anyway, On that note, I'm going to round this episode off here. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, description, shares greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now. Where's my mouse? What's over here?